NFL this past weekend. We're now joined by Sam Bradshaw, S11, writes for the SicEm365.com, and also has been with us throughout most of the year. Sam, thanks for your time. Paul just made this comment about the game with Air Force on Thursday. The one thing we know is that Air Force is not going to come in here any kind of just, okay, it's a bowl game. They will come in full throttle, focused, and wanting, of course, to play incredibly well.
Thanks for having me on. No question. You just hear some of the media availability from those Air Force guys. As soon as that bowl matchup was announced, you could just feel it. They want this game. They want this game bad. They're coming for it. Bears better be ready for a fight, because Air Force won't be the most talented team you play, but what they make you defend schematically is off the charts difficult. They're the most difficult offense schematically to defend, because they're the best flexbone offense in the nation this year. And their defense is a lot stronger than you typically see from a service academy. And it's going to be a handful. It's going to be cold, which is Air Force is used to. Baylor's not. It's going to be a situation where Baylor's got some guys they're used to having out there that are not out there. And, on the defensive side, Aranda is your defensive coordinator, but he's also trying to hire a new one. He's also trying to handle recruiting. He's also trying to hire a new safeties coach. So there's a lot going on that gives Air Force a bit more of an advantage than they would have if it was played in, say, October or something.
Sam, they are the best flexbone team in the country, and they run a lot of different looks out of that. They don't throw a lot, but they throw sometimes, and they make sure it's effective when they do. What's the scariest thing about them compared to what Baylor's strengths and weaknesses are on defense?
Well, the scariest thing with a defense like that, or with an offense like that, is there's so much to prepare for, and it's not just the coaches having a good plan. It's also just how many guys you have to have on the same page doing their job, even when it's mundane. When Aranda ran into Navy back in 2009, same Navy team that almost took down number 5 Ohio State at the Horseshoe and gave Missouri a sound beating, Aranda did a really good job stopping him, but one play, a defensive tackle decides to slant out of his gap, and they couldn't run down Ricky Dobbs right after that, and 50 yards later, it's a touchdown. That was 7 of the 17 points Aranda gave up in that game, but it just shows you can defend them very, very well all game, and then they just crease you because they stress you so much laterally, they stress you so much assignment-wise. But the thing about Air Force that's just nasty, it's not just the options. They are really good at zone. They're really good at trap. They'll throw 15 different forms of trap at you. They'll throw rocket tosses at you. They'll angle you, but they also get movement on their zone blocking. I've watched some of the film of them against Colorado, and admittedly, Colorado was a bit of a dumpster fire this year, but that's a Power 5 team, and they were pushing them back on zone runs. They were getting creases up the middle on zone and trap, and Brad Roberts was getting a field day. And it wasn't just inside. They hit him with the rocket toss, and Colorado had no answer. I mean, this is a team that'll punch you. They're good.
Sam, kind of drifting off topic a little bit, just not so much focusing on Air Force here, but, Aranda taking over as DC for this week, and then ultimately he'll go, find or finish off his defensive coordinator search. But, looking back now, how surprised or not surprised are you about the Ron Roberts change?
I'm very surprised based off Ron Roberts' reputation, not only as a schematic coach, but a long-time tenure as a head coach, long-time tenure with Aranda in that coaching tree, and then also just known within the coaching community as being a genuinely friendly guy and everything. So for it to be kind of a culture issue is a very big surprise, but I don't know enough about the exact details to comment any further than that. But I'm very surprised at it, to say the least. I expected with some of the issues you had in the secondary that they'd make a change with the safeties coach, but Roberts definitely surprised me.
On Ronnie Wheat, was he more moving on from him because of the secondary at safeties or because of special teams?
Special teams certainly didn't help him, and that certainly was a regression this year after losing Powledge. I don't pretend to know exactly everything that went into that decision, but I know Aranda's got quite the burden leading up to this bowl game. I'd feel a lot better about it if it was played after Christmas, like the other one that was in that flex pick for the bowl order for the Big 12. But, given enough time, I think Aranda can do a good job scheming these guys. He came out with a couple different plans in that game against Navy. He had one where it was a 4-down front, and they were two-gapping both guards with the defensive tackles, and then the defensive ends were two-gapping the offensive tackles, which really gave Navy triple options some fits. But what really got me is they went to like a 3-3-5, and the way they played their corners and the way they played their defensive ends, Navy couldn't get the triple going on them at all. I mean, it was almost like teaching tape watching them just cut them down. It was impressive to see.
Sam Bradshaw, S11 with us, SicEm365.com football analyst on 365 Sports.
Sam, do you expect to see Baylor attack this defense any differently than they would normally? I mean, would they throw the ball more, or are we going to see a game that's, because of the weather and the conditions, is mostly run on both sides?
I think it's going to be more run than they otherwise would be due to the weather. But I felt like Baylor's going to live and die with that for the most part anyway. I mean, I don't anticipate Air Force just giving you man coverage after man coverage. They'll do it situationally when they think they can get you off the field, but they also are aware if you did a 100-meter relay team for your secondary and Baylor receivers, it's probably not going to go well for the Falcons. That's a lot of speed to give single coverage risk to a lot of time. I think, with Baylor, you're going to base out of that run game. You're built on reliable, violent offense, that wide zone, that frontside toss, and then a lot of the different counters that you have to those plays. So it was always going to be run. And this game probably has the lowest number of possessions in all of bowl season, especially with Army and Navy not playing anybody. This game's going to go by quick, which people in the stands will probably be happy with because it's going to be, 10, 20 degrees outside.
Yeah.
But, yeah, they're going to base out of the run, and they're going to make Air Force show that they can stop it. Wyoming was able to get some movement on them on the ground. Wyoming is not some exceptional offense, but in the trenches, they were able to move this sound Air Force defense around.
Sam, what do you think the focus has been, or what would you assume the focus has been with Blake Shapen over the last 3-4 weeks?
I think obviously they're in the film room studying their opponent, but I think just settling them down, getting back to the basics, just mechanics, and then not trying to do too much, just focusing on do your job, do your 111. And I think a lot of the improvement we're going to see from him is going to come over the offseason. But, for the most part, even though the interceptions were up, a lot of those were tip drills. There were very few of those where I just was looking at it and going, all right, that guy just made a completely dumb decision. It was either late or it was high or something like that. But as far as the defense is giving me this, I'm going here, that part of it didn't worry me, if that makes sense. It's more just, can you be consistent with your mechanics so that your naturally accurate throwing ability comes to the forefront?
Sam, have they had enough time to prepare to play Air Force? Because you always wonder about those who have no time. It's like part of their schedule, even if they've played before. Is this enough time because of what you've mentioned, the experience that Aranda's had?
Well, we're about to find out. Air Force is a really good team. If you don't believe me, ask Louisville, who they ran all over last year. A good Louisville team, I might add. I think they've got enough time. You've had 2-3 weeks to do it. That's a lot more than a lot of teams get. So we're about to find out whether or not he's able to juggle everything. But I think they've got a good shot at doing a pretty good job against this Air Force team. But this offense is good. They got an experienced quarterback who, when he can set his feet, is a pretty decent thrower. And their fullback, Brad Roberts, pretty pedestrian name, but he's 182 yards from being their all-time career-leading rusher. He's the Mountain West Player of the Year. He racks up 100-yard games like it's drinking water. The guy's just outstanding. He's a lot more dynamic of a fullback than you typically see from these Service Academy fullbacks. Usually you have a lumbering guy that can just kind of fall forward. This guy can do that, but he can also break some big runs for you and get a little bit more out of it than you would typically see. He can get to the edge, too.
Sam, thoughts on Kyron Drones and Devin Neal entering the transfer portal?
Neal was a little bit of a surprise for me, but at the same time, I don't have connections on the team. I just figured he was in line to potentially play a lot next year, and he has a lot of athletic upside. Drones, I understand guys wanting to play now, and, I didn't see too much from him in that West Virginia game that made me think he would beat out Chapin. I know everybody's down on Chapin because anytime you're losing close games, the mistakes you're making are magnified. But comparing what I saw from both of them against West Virginia and what I've seen from Chapin throughout the year, it was going to be an uphill climb to unseat him, and I don't blame a kid for transferring where he thinks he has a chance to play.
And I guess I should also have asked about Micah Mazuka because obviously down an O-line body heading into this game with him in the transfer portal yesterday.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. I think Mose Jeffrey will do a good job, but Baylor definitely wants to stay healthy on the offensive line. You hate to lose an upside talent like that, but I hear it was something where it just wasn't a fit between the two sides. Mm-hmm. Baylor wanted things done a certain way. Mazuka wanted it done a different way, so they're parting ways, and Baylor will have to fill that spot.
I wonder who's going to win that battle. He wants to do it a certain way, and Baylor wants to do it a certain way. That usually doesn't go well.
No, it doesn't, and it usually ends up with both of them going their separate ways. But I've heard good things in terms of being able to backfill the offensive line, particularly with the transfer portal. I haven't heard specifics, but I've heard good things on that. I'm not too worried about it. But yeah, just for this bowl game, I think Mose Jeffrey will step in and play well. He has most of the year.
So low possessions. Brad Roberts is a force offensively. They got a pretty stingy defense. Just what are your kind of, in summation, your feelings on Baylor's chances here and kind of your expectations for this game?
I think Baylor is the better team and should win. Air Force does a good job of being a disruptive defense, but their total stats and a lot of just their raw statistical totals are really sound. But a lot of the offenses they've played have been pretty weak. I mean, when FCS Northern Iowa, a Boise State team that completely reshuffled their offense midseason, and Utah State, when those are the best three offenses you've played that aren't flexbone, you really haven't been tested. And against teams like Nevada, against teams like Wyoming, Colorado, Utah State, Boise State, teams that Baylor was able to move the ball on pretty successfully, like TCU, Texas State, and BYU, compared pretty evenly to Air Force. So I'm expecting Baylor's going to be able to move the ball on these guys pretty well. Obviously, the weather's going to make that a little tougher. So it really comes down to, can you stop that flex bone? And more importantly, can you stop Brad Roberts when they're not doing the flex bone? Because Colorado couldn't and several other teams couldn't.
How much would it make a difference if you had Siaka Ika inside there against that offense that Air Force runs?
That would be a huge difference just because you could put him on an offensive lineman, and that lineman is not going to be able to get any movement whatsoever against Ika. But I completely understand Ika's business decision. That guy is most likely going to the NFL here in a couple months, and the last thing he needs is somebody who's going to be flying jets here in the next couple of years, diving at his knees 50 times over a course of a game right before he has to work out for pro scouts with millions on the line. I totally get him missing out on the game.
There is a story, S11, SicEm365.com, Aranda versus Navy 2009 compared to Missouri and Ohio State, among a few others. Again, post your questions for Air Force previews, and then, of course, your preview as well, advanced depth chart. Great stuff, Sam, as always. Is there a specific bowl game outside of this one which you focused in on that you think is the most intriguing?
Intriguing. I don't have a particular one circled just because I want to get through this one.
Sure.
But, just in terms of who's actually going to show up, the Oklahoma State-Wisconsin one's going to kind of be negatively interesting. Half the teams are in the transfer portal. It'll be interesting to see how Ohio State does against Georgia. Georgia's just a monster, and Ohio State got pushed around in the second half by Michigan. But I think that is one that's going to be really interesting at the playoff level. And, how does Texas do without Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson and DeMarvion Overshown against a good Washington team? Washington's defense isn't all that strong, but, if Texas offensive line, which benefited a lot from Bijan making them look a lot better than they were, if they sputter for a little bit, Phoenix can put it on them, and Texas could have a huge fight on their hands.
Sam, thank you as always. Sam Bradshaw, S11, SicEm365.com football analyst with us, giving us a preview